Hi, I'm Wayne Stinnett, and this is the Talk Right podcast. Welcome aboard, and to all you listeners on Pirate Radio, yar. I'm Wayne Stinnett. This is my co-host, Nick Sullivan.
Everyone, greetings. I'm Nick Sullivan, Wayne's narrator for his books and writing a few of my own. And we have some special guests today. Another author/narrator pairing, two of which have never met each other before. So this is pretty cool. Wayne, do you want to do the introductions?
Why don't you go ahead and do that? I'm over here on YouTube right now.
Okay. So we have Christine Kling, who is the author of the Seychelle Sullivan series, as well as another series, which I'll ask her about because I can't remember it offhand, and her narrator, Rosemary Benson. So you've certainly heard Rosemary before, but you've probably never seen her before. So
Today's
welcome.
our first day.
Yes. Hi, Rosemary. It's really nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see your face live and in person.
That's right. We've had a strange email connection from Fiji and Turkey and all over the world.
Oh my gosh, Marshall.
It's always been email.
It has. And although whenever I go on Christine's blog, I get to see little pictures here and there of her adventures. And I live vicariously through you. That's what it is.
Well, Christine, I have to ask, what would you say, what percentage of your books have you written while at sea?
Oh dear. Probably 50% of them have been written while on a boat. The first ones were written when I was longing to be back on a boat, the first 50%. And then the rest were written while I was on board a boat, either my own or somebody else's or back to my own again. And so it's always been about my own experiences, but yeah. I mean, my first sailing experience was in the 1970s when we were still using sextants to sail.
Oh my goodness.
I have one of those.
Could you still use one if your electronics went down?
Yes, actually, I still have one, and so does Wayne, my husband. So we have two that'll be going on our new boat, which is crazy because it's so modern, the new boat. But we'll still have two sextants.
Redundancy.
Exactly.
Can you tell us?
Back.
Okay, Wayne's with us. Good. Well, I'm going to let Wayne ask you about your boat because I know it's something he's dying to know a bit about.
Yes, absolutely. You told me a little bit about it. It's aluminum, and you're going to be doing the Northwest Passage.
Yeah.
That is just, that blows my mind because that's something I've always wanted to do.
Well, there comes a time in a lot of sailors' lives when they go over to the dark side, we say, and we become power boaters, stink potters. And so we are building a big power boat, but there's a lot.
It was a sailboat.
No, it's a power boat. And
oh, wow.
What's interesting to me is that sailors have been circumnavigating for years. But for two people on a power boat to circumnavigate, there are very few instances where that's happened compared to the number of sailors. And as far as I know, nobody's circumnavigated on a power boat single-handed because it's a lot harder. You have to calculate your fuel. There's all this stuff. So what intrigued me about it was the new challenges about it. And I got to admit, I'm not going to miss when a squall is coming and we're looking out there and we're thinking, oh my gosh, a squall is coming. What are we going to do? And we can look at each other and say, absolutely nothing.
Close the
we
window.
don't have any sails. So
what is the designed range on it?
Well, it's probably 7,000 miles. If we go slow enough, a lot of the range depends on your speed, but we should be able to cross any ocean. We only expect to fill up on fuel once a year.
Wow.
Yeah, like 5,000 gallons.
Or you've got all the high tech fuel polisher systems and everything then, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we've even got the Alpha Laval centrifuge fuel cleaner that we've got multiple fuel polishing systems. And oddly enough, we're putting an old 50-year-old engine into it. We're rebuilding a Gardner diesel engine because all the modern engines have all this electronic stuff on them and you get hit by lightning and you're done.
Yeah.
So we're going very old school.
Wow.
So we
Yeah,
like
I've
to
been
do it.
following Wayne's blog and he gets into a lot of detail about stuff.
He does.
I'm a detail guy, and the just the whole reverse pitch propellers. I was just so interested, so into that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be quite different, but you know, the whole situation right now with the coronavirus has changed things for cruising boats so much, with the borders being closed, and we don't know when we're going to be able to. We're building the boat in Turkey, and we don't know when we're going to be able to leave Turkey. Right now, even Greece, there are Greek islands that are like just a few miles off the coast of Turkey. They won't let us in right now. Turkey is reopening their borders on the 15th of June to 19 chosen countries, supposedly trying to get their tourism, because they live off tourism. It's like their second largest industry here. Greece is doing the same thing, but Greece and Turkey have always been at odds and they're not opening their borders to each other. So we hope that that will change, because we're hoping to launch the boat in August. Right
in August, that was what I was just about to ask.
Yeah.
So by then, I think everything should be back to normal. Hopefully.
You know, who knows? With one thing about being boaters, you've got to just go with the flow. Whatever
Exactly.
will be.
Are you on, so you're on mainland Turkey, or are you on a Turkish island?
We're in mainland. We're in the city of Antalya.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's on the south-facing coast. So we're right at the corner, where if we go out and we turn the corner, then we go up the Aegean coast. And that's where we hope to do our sea trials after we launch. We're going to go up and do all that great coast of Göcek and Fethiye and Marmaris and Bodrum. And so,
But I know you're going to do the Northwest Passage. What about the Southern Ocean? You going to give that a try too?
yes, eventually. But what we're thinking of,
after you go around the world clockwise, just go counterclockwise to the south.
you know, we built this boat to be an ice boat. It's capable so it's built to incredibly strong specs and can handle being in the ice. So what we're thinking now, that we don't know when we're going to be able to leave, that probably in the summer, next summer, not this summer, but next summer, we'll make our way across the Mediterranean in winter, head up England, Scotland, and then cross the Atlantic on the north, do Iceland, Greenland, Labrador.
Oh, wow.
And spend our time in the Canadian Maritimes for a winter, because we've spent the first summer crossing, and then the second summer we'll do the Northwest Passage.
Are you able to operate the boat with just yourself and your husband, or do you have a higher complement for some of the tougher journeys?
Just the two of us. That's the plan.
Oh.
And it's 78 feet long. So that's something.
Do you have a dedicated writing room aboard?
Yes, I do.
Wow.
There's one, we only have a 2-cabin boat, and one is our cabin and the other cabin is Christine's office. So,
Wayne doesn't have an office? I mean, how's he going?
He has a workshop. His workshop is bigger than my office, of course.
Okay. Or does it have some air?
Yeah, and 78 feet, you'd think there'd be more room than that. But
is it single engine or twins?
Single.
Wow. So,
yeah.
What size engine?
It's really small, actually, but the boat is long and slender and easily driven. So it's a 150 horse engine.
Well, that's just super a high fuel torque. Sipper. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We're kind of hoping to do 2 liters a mile. So that would be pretty good
Well, I'd love
Wow,
to
that's
put
2 miles a gallon.
at 10 or 11 knots, 2 liters to the mile.
Wow,
oh,
Yeah.
wow.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, we're not here to talk about boats, but that topic does come up in our podcast. So my question is, how much of Seychelle is actually Christine?
I don't know. People ask me that a lot. I would say that most of her angsting, not knowing what to do and running off and doing stupid stuff is totally me. I get so many reviews where people say, oh, you know, these books, I just get so frustrated that she does this stupid stuff. And I'm like, yeah, so do I.
Yeah, but she does stupid stuff to save people.
I
It's for
know.
other people. It's not like she's playing the lottery or, you know,
Yeah.
playing slot machines in Florida. She's saving people.
I know. And when
I'm
guys
sorry.
do it, they don't call it stupid stuff.
Thank
Where
you.
did the name Seychelle Sullivan? I'm partial to half of that for sure, but I love the name. Where did that come from?
The Seychelles Islands, I'm betting.
Well, yes, but why did you pick it and stick it on a Sullivan?
I just lost an earbud.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
It came from I've only got one son. I have an only child. And when he was a baby, I went to these mommy and me classes because I got pregnant when I was 30, and I had never been somebody who because I was always off traveling. So my friends and other people who had babies, I was never there to like hold their babies. So when he was born, I was like, it's a baby.
What do I do?
I know how to handle halyards and lines and do all of that stuff, but I didn't know what to do with a baby. So I went to these mommy and me classes to try to learn what to do with a baby. And so I was at the mommy and me class, and you all are sitting in a circle on this carpet, and this is in Florida. And we've all got our babies in front of us. And I turned to the woman next to me and I said, so what's yours named? And she said, Staniel. And I said, who names their kid Staniel now? And she said, well, it's for Staniel Key.
Oh, okay.
Well, I know Staniel Key in the Bahamas. And she said, yeah, you know, that's where he was conceived. And we've decided that we're going to name all of our children after islands. And I just thought that was the funniest thing. You know, this poor kid was going to go through his life named Staniel. And so
But did you raise your child on the boat?
yes. Tim came home from the hospital to the boat, and he grew up on, yeah, he was a boat kid. So so I remembered that. And when I was writing the Seychelle book was years later. Tim was 11 or 12 years old. And so that's what happens. And she's named Seychelle. She has a brother named Pitt for Pitcairn.
Oh, okay.
And she has another brother named Maddie.
So
That one I don't
Pitcairn
know.
Island, that was, what was that explorer's name that got stuck in the ice in the Southern Ocean and
No, that's not him.
navigated
Pitcairn
to
is Mutiny
Pitcairn
on the
Island?
Bounty.
Was it Mutiny on the Bounty? Okay,
Yeah,
I'm getting
the
my
Bounty.
books messed
Still
up.
mutineer families there.
Yeah,
Fascinating island.
yeah. The
Well,
brother
I-
Maddie is named Madagascar. So, you know, can you imagine naming your kid Madagascar? So it's 3 kids in the family, Pitcairn, Seychelle, and Madagascar.
Oh, wow.
But it was
I'd love
based
to-
on a true story.
I'd love to bring Rosemary into this. Can the two of you talk about the very first days when I guess you were listening, Christine, to auditions, and Rosemary, when you were looking at the material and doing the audition? A lot of times, this is for the general viewers. they work through ACX. A lot of times, the producer will just pick someone, and the author may not have much say in it. But in this case, Christine, I'm assuming you listened to a bunch of people and chose Rosemary to
Mhm.
bring life to Seychelle. Can you tell us a bit about that?
I don't know. It's kind of something that happened for me, like viscerally. Um, I had this other narrator that had narrated the first book, and I never wanted to listen to those because I knew I had the voice of Seychelle in my head, and I didn't want to mess that up. So I never listened to the other narrators' recordings at all. It was out of my hands. Brilliance Audio did that through Random House, and I didn't have anything to do with that. But I had had friends tell me that they did not like the recording, that they thought that they just for some reason didn't like it. So I got more negative feedback than positive, and that really made me not want to listen to it. So I never did. And then when I decided when I got the rights reverted to me to the books, and now I could do my own narration, and I was looking for a narrator, I started listening to the auditions. And I think I actually propositioned you, if I can remember. I don't think you were just a cold call one. I don't remember
That
exactly.
is so funny. I don't remember.
I don't either. It's been so
I-
long ago.
Yeah, I really don't remember. I do know that, no, I can't remember. But
How long ago
but
was it?
7 years, 6 years
6 or
for
7 years ago.
for book 2. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. But I was, at that point already, I knew I had to be really careful because I had had a bad experience accepting a book that I did not get the script for ahead of time. And I didn't want to say no because it was a major publisher, and it was a huge mistake because I can't do graphic violence or graphic sex.
Okay.
It's not my thing.
Yeah.
There are so many people out there who are so great at it. Nobody's going to miss me. Right. And so when I went on ACX, I did not click, romance, or I think I still had mysteries and thrillers because I thought, well, if it's a
Mhm.
mystery, probably good. If it's a thriller, not good. So whatever it was, once I saw the piece of the audition piece, I felt safe right away. I mean, I really felt like this is story led. This is led
Mhm.
by a story and characters. And the character if I remember correctly, the character in the audition was this really horrible guy who wore shorts that were way too short with nothing
Yes.
underneath. And he was like, and it was just like really horrible, obviously a thorn in her paw, for
Yes.
her life. And I just thought it was hilarious. And I felt safe about it. So for me,
Mhm.
that was the number one thing. And then when I did that first book, which was actually book 2 of the series,
Yes.
oh my gosh, my heart just went into it. I mean, my heart
Mhm.
broke and my heart soared, and I just loved the characters and the adventure and the heart of Seychelle. She is a hero. She's a hero, and she would never call herself that. She just could never be any other way. And she's always rescuing somebody at their peril.
Yes, she is.
And and she has trouble. She has trouble with relationships, and
Oh,
she's got a
yes.
great backstory of just really sadness, and she just has overcome like millions of things. And obviously the most important thing to her, I'm sorry, I'm babbling on, but I love this character. The most important thing to Seychelle is relationships. It's not money. And she puts
Mhm.
her heart and soul into, her she has, acquired her father's business of this you know, she's got her boat, and it's basically a tug that rescues other ships, and she's so capable, and people always shortchange her because she's a woman, she's attractive, and you know, people just automatically dismiss her, and then
Mhm.
she goes through the rest of the book showing them that that was a mistake.
So
So
one of the things that's so interesting to me is that you connected to the characters, but before that happened, I listened to your audition. Before you'd even read the first book that you narrated. And when I heard your voice, to me, like I'd listened to a bunch of other auditions and I went, oh, that doesn't sound like her. That's not the voice in my head. And then I'd listen to another one. Oh, totally not. That one's not it at all. And then when I heard you, I went, that's Seychelle. That's
That's
like the voice
exactly the
in my
moment
head.
I had when Nick was reading mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the voice in my head, I always had, you know, Jesse McDermott has been around since 1986 in my head. And he
Yes.
finally grew legs and crawled out just about 7 years ago. But I've always had this voice in my head. And when Nick auditioned, he hit it. I mean, he just nailed it right on the head. And the fact
Yeah.
that he did Rusty Thurman so well, and Rufus and all the other smaller characters,
Right.
it was
Well,
just icing on the cake.
same with Rosemary. I mean, I particularly chose the piece for them to audition that had a bunch of weird characters in it, and I had to see, you know, can you do the
See, I'm
female?
not the only one, Nick.
You'd be surprised by people that just pick chapter 1 and then it's just 2 pages of narration, and then someone might go, hi, how's it going? And that might be the only dialogue.
Oh no.
yeah, yeah, you
No,
need,
I picked a bar scene with a Jamaican character, a surfer guy,
Mhm.
an old grizzly old conch guy. I think there was wasn't there a Puerto Rican boat captain in there too or something? I threw the whole gamut at him at one time.
We
Yep.
had it was a 20-year-old gal in there too, I think. It
Mhm.
was a wide range.
well,
Well,
I don't know how, I'm pretty sure you would agree with me, Nick, when you see an audition like that, it's so much better because when you're producing for someone yourself, when you're self-producing, because later on, if you haven't had the opportunity to do those characters and to live in those characters for the author, and you're just doing this little narration piece that they chose, later on, you could be in for a world of hurt.
Oh, I would much rather be not chosen uh, because I didn't
Yeah.
do some of the things that he would want than to book it and then have him go, oh God. Much
Yeah.
rather just I want my authors to be happy.
Oh, it's all you want. It's all you
well,
want.
one thing that I really like about Nick is the way he does the women characters in my books, and that was a question I wanted to ask you, Rosemary. How do you do the male voices?
Um, I actually cast everybody from either actors or people I know. And sometimes it just takes, it really is the description that the author gives me. So, you know, when I get a really good description of characters, I mean, Christine's just, they just talk for themselves. That's not always the case, but when you get a good enough description in the text, it kind of works for, I mean, it just does it for you. And if you have a range of, I have a vocal range because I'm a singer, so I can speak very high or speak very low. So I don't really have to try to go like this and be a man. I don't, you know, I don't have to do that because my voice is naturally pitched lower. But sometimes, you know, I might be thinking more Ed Asner
Mhm.
or for an older guy, or I might be thinking more, you know, somebody who's a little bit more melodic voiced, but the same age, because that you just can't do all your old characters sounding gruff and blah, blah, blah. You just can't do that. Just like you can't do all your women, you know, or old ladies like, and like cartoony, you know, because there's a fine line between, you know, being real and being a cartoon. And so you have to, I think if you picture the person from the description, you can cast that person just like you're casting a movie. And then once you have that actor in your head, even it's just like a nuance that will flavor that character in a different way from other male characters. And it's great if they're geographically located from, you know, other areas, and you can say, well, this guy's from Chicago and this guy's from New York and this guy's from Texas, and that's all great, or Haiti as the case may be. Or the Dominican Republic. Oh, that was a quest down the rabbit hole on YouTube. Oh my gosh, I'm listening to Dominican people speak, and it's just like saying somebody's American. There are so many Dominican accents. And
Yes.
I had to pick the one I felt that I could do justice to and sustain. Because, and then of course he shows up in another book, and I was like, thank God. Thank God I picked that.
But do you keep notes on your characters?
Actually,
This is for both of you.
Actually, I don't. I know people like do all sorts of very, you know, they have beautiful organizational things where they'll take a clip, you know, of the voice, and they'll save it in a Excel file, all this stuff, which is great, but that doesn't work. I mean, I am just not that organized. But what I do remember is who I cast as the character. And,
okay.
you know, I mean, I've only done a few series where the same characters show up, and you know, 5 books here, 6 books there, whatever. So it's not like I'm doing 20 books with 2 years in between or something where, you know, I don't remember, but I do keep all the files, and there have been a you know, 1 or 2 times where I'll go back to an old book and say, I'm gonna go find that character. But it's only happened twice. Is it worth all of that organization? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't save the samples. That does seem to be, I know I can find the sample if I need it, because I'm a audio pack rat. Every book I've ever recorded, I've got it in a hard drive somewhere. But I do keep originally pieces of paper, voicescapes for every book. And I would usually clip them together if they're part of a series, so I could just grab the whole pile. And a few years ago, I realized we have computers, and I could just put them into a text file that I could actually have open behind the Pro Tools, and I could put notes in it. And so now everything's digital, but I still have a filing cabinet over this way that is just stuffed with different sheets for everything.
Oh my gosh.
And, Wayne, I believe Wayne's going to have a second edition of his Jesse McDermott series, books 1 and 2 come out, which we'll be recording. So I'm going to have to find those sheets.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. That's coming up. It's whenever you can get on it. It's going to be a lot of fun re-recording those.
Oh, definitely.
That's interesting because I had the first book of my series, as we said, was recorded with Brilliance Audio. And when I got the rights back to that, I had Rosemary do that. So she did books 2 through 5 and then did book 1. And I sometimes wonder how it would have been different, because if you did book 1 to start, you wouldn't have known the characters and stuff as well as you do. So it's quite interesting, you know, how that might be different now for you, Wayne, when you redo book 1, because you know the characters differently.
Rosemary, did you listen to the first book and before you did the second book and try to?
Oh no.
No,
Absolutely not. No, because my tendency
No, you don't want to pollute your brain with someone else's performance.
And I don't want to cast any judgments on the previous narrator. I had no idea what the story was about why the series wasn't being done by the same narrator it's not my business. And so
Okay.
that wouldn't happen. But I also happen to be like an unconscious mimic. And this comes from all my life. I'm a professional singer. And so all my life, from the time I was a kid, and people would say to me, oh, well, do Carole King, or do somebody like so iconic, like think you, Barbara Streisand, or do
Cher.
Cher. Yeah, well, yeah, I can do them, but should I? No. That's the answer to that question. Because it doesn't get you anywhere unless you're going to do like Legends in Concert, which they actually did for years and years in Atlantic City. But yeah, it's just too easy for me to slip into those, you know, the minutia of their styles, you know, and it's just they're so identifiable. Their articulation is so identifiable, and yeah, that's not a good idea, I
No.
think.
I agree.
Christine, you mentioned, you've got book one out again, fresh and new. Will Seychelle ever return?
I don't know. When I did the fifth book, so books 1 through 4 were my time with traditional publishing. So I did the whole agent thing, got a contract with Ballantine Books for 2 books, and then they re-upped me for 2 more. At the time, my contracts included audio rights. And on the first 2-book contract, the rights were sold to Brilliance Audio. And Brilliance only chose to do the first book, and they never did any more of the series. When I got my rights back, I got the rights back for the audio that had not been used, but Brilliance retained the rights to the first book until they were re-upping. And then it was a bit of a struggle to get them back, because this things had moved from this company to this company, and Brilliance is now owned by Amazon, and nobody was quite sure what was going on. And so it was a long email struggle to get the rights back. And then they said, do you want to buy the recording? And it was an astronomical price that they sent me, which surprised me, and I said, due to what I'd heard before, it wasn't even an issue for me. I was just trying to get the rights back to re-record it. So that finally got approved, and we went ahead and had Rosemary do it. So it was a very happy moment for me when I got those rights back and could get it all in the same voice. Because, as you know, first books, whether you're talking about ebooks, people reading, print books, audio books, if the first book doesn't sell them and they walk away from there, it's really hard to get them to move on with the rest of the series. So,
Or even if you're happy with the first one, but if for whatever reason you have a different narrator all of a sudden pop up on the second book,
yeah,
you're probably going to lose a third of the listeners minimum.
yeah.
It's usually good to keep
Yes.
the through line. But have you considered bringing Seychelle back, or are you, now that you're sort of in a completely different world of your own, you might be?
Well, what happened was, with the 4 books that I did for Ballantine, when I did the 4th book, something happened, and Wayne can probably relate to this. When you're writing a book and you get to the end of it, and you have planned a certain ending. I'm an outliner, and I did not plan that book to end the way it ended. And when it did end that way, I was like, oh no, this can't happen to her. She doesn't know what to do in this situation. She's lost in this situation. And it also happened that Ballantine dropped me at that point and didn't want any more books of that series. And so I was like, well, I don't know how to get her out of this fix that I've gotten her into at the end of this book. So I'm going to go do something completely different. And I went and wrote 3 other books. And 10 years passed between the time I wrote the last book on what was book number 4 in the Seychelle series, And then I decided to write book number 5, which was finally, okay, I've figured out what would
Very loud.
happen in the circumstance that I got her into. And I wrote that thinking, okay, this will finish it for her. But of course, real life was 10 years, but I'm at liberty to say in my fictional world, it was only 5 years. And I kind of liked that new Seychelle. I'm an older, different person when I'm writing it. She's become an older, different person 5 years later. And I liked her a lot in that book. So I meant it to be the last book when I wrote it, but I find myself drawn back to her a lot as this person. So I wouldn't rule out writing another one. And I also have an idea for a prequel, which is something that Wayne did. He went back and wrote a prequel. So I have a thought, because the books begin with her having had this other boyfriend in the past. And I have some thoughts about writing a prequel that would be about that situation and how she can, because you know, you have a tendency to write characters in a bad place. And so it begins with her father having recently died and all of these different things. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be interesting to go back and write her with this other guy and write about the death of her father and write about all that. So that's occurred to me too. So Seychelle may have other books in the future. I don't know.
Well, it would make a lot of people happy, because of all my fiction books that I've done series, Seychelle's the one that everybody wants to know more about. Everybody's saying, when is the next Seychelle? And I said, well, I'm not really sure if that's like done.
Yeah.
It kind of, I feel like it's done, but I don't know. And I mean, it's really whenever people ask me about that, it's that seems to be the character that really has staying power with people who listen to my fiction. My
Oh, that's nice
narration
to
of
know.
fiction, not my fiction, my narration of your fiction.
Well, I know some of the authors that you've narrated, and I'm incredibly honored that you'd say that, because you've done some amazing books that I love. So
Well, I do. I'm really I'm just going to say I am very blessed to be able to pick and choose the authors that I produce for. And it's not always the case with everybody. And actually, the only people I have been producing for independently anymore were you and Michael Wallace. That's it. That's it.
And I know Michael.
He, you know, he's just, and he's so prolific, and I've done so many different kinds of things for him. But you're the one who challenges me the most with research, because I'm sure this happens to you all the time, Nick. Well, Wayne, when you're writing so specifically in this environment of being at sea, or, you know, being on a ship or being on a boat, that it's, when you hear something that rings untrue because you're using the wrong language, or you're not describing anything in a realistic way, it bothers people. I mean, they nail you right away, and it's just like, no, they wouldn't do that, or they wouldn't say that. And
there are two groups that are just absolutely nitpicky about consistency and correctness, and that there's the gun nuts and the boat nuts. And I have guns and boats both.
Well, I'll tell you, it is one of the bugs for me is there's not a ready resource for finding out about guns, how to pronounce the different kinds of guns that have acronyms or that have numbers after them. And you're not sure if people, you know, some people say .5, or, you know, it's, you don't know what you don't know. And that's where research comes in. And so that is, I can see that's where my fear lies. So,
Mhm.
looking at those things, and because you're the voice of the author is the expert, and
Mhm.
your voice is what people hear when they say Christine Kling. They're thinking, oh, that's Christine's voice. So that means whatever I say incorrectly reflects on Christine. And
Well, I
or
feel
it
bad.
could reflect on me, but
I feel bad sometimes when I give you notes and I'm like, no, Bahamian beer is
oh,
not Gaelic.
Click.
Click.
I found that online. I always look for two resources. And that's what I found twice. And I thought,
Because a lot of
okay, that
people
must
say it
be,
wrong.
well, here's how we found out. But it's good. But you can't always you can't always contact the author for everything because, you're just going along your way and you just, I've always found something, and thank goodness for YouTube, especially for accents. Like I said, the
Yeah.
Dominican accent was like, oh, please help me. But you never want to come off as being like not knowing or being ignorant, and it happens to the best of people. I'm listening to this book, and Eduardo Ballerini, who is one of the most incredible narrators in the world.
You
He's
just said a
incredible.
huge article in New York Times.
And he just was exactly featured in the New York Times. And I'm listening to a book that he's narrating. And he's talking about it's the environment is the Jersey Shore. Now I'm very familiar with it because I lived at the Jersey Shore for many years. And he called a town, a Jersey Shore town, Manasquan instead of Manasquan. And I thought, oh, how dare you, Eduardo Ballerini? How dare you not look up and have someone research for you or something? It was just,
I
Well,
got
that begs the
getting
question.
a review in like an email. She like sought me out and sent me this all caps angry thing because I mispronounced a street name in San
oh my
Francisco. Back when I was just out of college, it was like a 1999 book, and it was 10 years later. And so I had to reach out. She said, "Just because New York and is going after," I'm like, "All right, I'm actually not
Ooh.
from New York. That's where I live
Ooh,
near."
wow.
But I had long since learned that if it's a small town and you think it's said a certain way, you're almost certainly wrong. So I almost
True.
always now call the local library.
Yes, that's what I do.
Or if it's a street name and I feel like it could go some weird way, I will call businesses on that street. I'll Google Maps, I'll find it. Or if it's
That's
some
true.
weird little hotel, I'll wait till they're closed and call so that the machine will say how it's
Yes.
said.
Yeah,
Because you
can you
don't want the
imagine?
angry all caps emails.
This is what we have to do. But you don't know what you don't know. And there was a big
No,
thread
it's that
about it
Rumsfeld
on
line, unknown
Facebook
unknowns.
with somebody from the South had a book, and they were talking about New York City and going to Houston Street.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Houston Street in the Village is not, it's spelled the same, but it's Houston. And you wouldn't know. Why would you know that? Nobody knows. But boy, did he get, oh my gosh, the flack, the flack he got. And so now every time, somebody talks about this particular thing that we all go through, they're like, well, at least I didn't say Houston Street. It's like,
But
oh my gosh.
Christine, do you do the quality check after she's finished narrating? Listen to
Yeah,
the whole book?
I do. I listen to the whole book.
I do the
Yes.
same thing. That's the only way to go. You can hire somebody to do it, but
Yep.
they're going to miss
No.
some things.
Well, that's
No.
always the last thing, when I have my own proofer and I miss it, and then my proofer misses it. That's the final, let's just make really, really sure.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine why any author would not do that. If you're
Yeah.
self-publishing,
Yes.
those are
right.
your words. Those are your
Mhm.
babies, and
Mhm.
that's what our job is. Our job is to say it right, for heaven's sake. So
Well,
And
Wayne,
we have remarkably few notes in all the 5 books that we've done together now. There have been remarkably few, to me anyway. I think
Uh,
they're,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think, some of them are those nautical terms.
yes. Well, I mean, I don't even think of it. It's normal to me. I
Of
know the
course.
difference between a bowline and a bowline,
And a bowline.
but they're
I
spelled the
know.
same.
I know.
So how do you say, if you say the bowline when it's supposed to be a bowline, it's different.
Yeah, yeah.
We were just talking about that before you came on, Christine. That was how I weeded out several narrators.
Yeah.
I mean, if
So-
you're willing to listen to a narrator's audition and understand that this is pre-research, and you can get with a narrator and you feel that you trust that narrator to do the due diligence and do the research so that they do sound like that expert that you've written,
Mhm.
that's one thing. But if you can't get that straightened out right from the beginning with your narrator, it's
Yeah.
probably better to go with somebody else,
Mhm.
because that's part of it.
Mhm.
That's your job. It's an important thing. And as Nick said, you will find out later from the listeners.
Oh, yes.
They will nab you. So
I
you don't wanna be
didn't
that
find
one.
out until much later on that Nick was also an avid scuba diver and a traveler of the Caribbean. So that was a big
Oh,
plus right off
Mhm.
the bat.
oh, that's cool.
Mhm.
Sure.
The dialects, I was actually I can't believe I've never mentioned this to you, Wayne, but one of my first jobs out of college was a BET version of Sesame Street called the Fabulous Reggae Dogs. So I had
Wow.
we had a guy from Trinidad, we had a guy from Haiti, 2 guys from Jamaica, a gal from Jamaica. But sometimes I would have to do ancillary. I was basically the version of Professor Smith from Lost in Space. I was the
Dr.
evil,
Smith, yeah.
the white dog with a pith helmet who was always trying to monetize everything on the island. And but I got a lot of work on Caribbean dialects out of that gig.
Fantastic.
It's funny, Rosemary, when you said you cast the characters in your head, as a writer, I kind of do the same thing. Sometimes I go on Google Images and I'll write, okay, 30-year-old woman with red hair in Google Images. And I'll look at all through those images and I'll go, oh, that one looks like my character. And I
Oh.
use Scrivener to write my books. And in
Oh.
Scrivener, when you have a character outline, you can do this in Scrivener. And I bring in these images of random people. They're very rarely famous people, but just having an image for me kind of makes me know how that person's going to talk. So in a
Wow.
sense, I cast them too. I cast them
is-
with weird images out of Google Images. But
That is
I just like
cool.
having a picture.
Well,
But
that leads to a fun question. If there was a Seychelle Sullivan movie, who's someone you would
Everybody
potentially
goes,
play
everybody. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't
Susie
know
Seychelle.
now who, back in the day, so Seychelle's love interest is a guy who is a part Samoan, part Asian guy who's a surfer and Aikido guy. And I always thought, because remember, the Seychelle books were written in the mid-2000s. And I thought the perfect guy for this was The Rock, back when he had hair. And I thought The Rock was perfect for BJ. This is the guy in this. And I never could quite cast Seychelle. I couldn't think of an actress. When people would ask me, I was always at a loss. They would say, all the famous actresses at the time, and I'd say, well, sure, I'd take any of them, make a movie, please. But
I could see Angelina Jolie.
that's the one that I thought. And actually, back in the day when I was being published by Ballantine, they did send it out to some Hollywood folks, and they said, we probably could not sell this story unless a famous actor or actress wanted it to be made into a movie, and we would suggest someone like Angelina Jolie. They actually said her for
Wow.
Seychelle. And so at the time, The Rock was living in South Florida, where I was. And I knew the neighborhood he lived in. And I was kind of thinking of going to the Publix, where he would probably shop, and stalking him and saying, you'd be perfect for this book because you've only been making these dumb movies. Make a serious movie. But I never stalked him, actually. I just thought about it. But
well, she wouldn't have been my first pick, but I'm thinking about the time period, and that would have been around the time when Mr. and Mrs. Smith came out, which was an action movie. And yeah, I mean, I can see why that would be someone that they would think of, but I don't know. I just don't see her. I think Seychelle's going to be sturdier. I don't know. Why am I telling you? You wrote the character.
I don't know.
I mean, she seems a little delicate. I'm thinking, somebody real, somebody's like really attractive enough to turn people's heads, but really can just like, toss those ropes like they don't weigh a thing, and and not have any kind of consciousness about her attractiveness. There's nothing driving her behavior having to do with her attractiveness. And so, all right, I guess I've thought about this a lot.
Well, we've got a couple of comments and some questions on
good.
YouTube. Let's see. Don Rich is on there. Nicholas Harvey. How you guys doing? Nick Harvey told me who I was trying to think of earlier. Ernst Shackleton.
Yes.
That was one great adventure. I mean, just what he accomplished in that little tiny boat. Unbelievable. Let's see. There was a question here. Where was it? I can't. Oh, here we are. Bolzen Igran asks, and this is for you, Rosemary. Do you do Lois's voice on Family Guy?
No.
Apparently, he thought
don't.
maybe you did.
Oh my gosh.
No.
But
Do you mean
should.
can I imitate it, or do I actually do it? No, I don't actually do it. I don't. No.
And let's see who else we got here. Yvonne Edwards saw us drinking rum, so her husband brought her an Irish coffee.
I'm a 2:30 in the morning wino.
Oh my goodness. That's right.
Yes, that's right. It's very late there where you're at, isn't it?
I'm just remembering
Let's
being
see
on
if
the
I
other
have
side
a
of the
question
world.
for Rosemary. This is a question I like to ask. I act like we've done more than one prior to this, but I will ask all narrators. What is your kryptonite accent? What is one that if someone came to you and said, we'd like you to do this book, it's first person and it's the guys or girl is from here, the whole book's going to be in this dialect, what would lead you to go, maybe somebody else?
I would, right off the top of my head, if it's going to be the whole book, I would, yeah, anything that was an Asian language, I would say no, because there is not enough time for me to do an appropriate study of any Vietnamese or Japanese or, Chinese. I just don't. My sister-in-law is Filipina, and I still cannot. We had, people from the Philippines in these books, and I had her actually record a piece for me in Tagalog, And boy, I really struggled to try to, get myself out of it and make it sound like something. Because I'm a musician, I do have a musical ear, and so I've never met an accent that defeated me. But in order to do justice to something like that, I'd have to have several months of study with a coach, probably somebody like PJ Oakland or somebody like that, and pay somebody to coach me and do a deep study. And, there's probably not enough time or money for that sort of thing. So I would have people to recommend, I know narrators, who can do all those things. So I would probably recommend someone else.
I'm actually glad you brought up PJ. Wayne, we're going to get PJ on.
Oh, he's fantastic. You're going to love him.
We'll basically fill the hour with every accent on the continent.
Oh, he is amazing. Yeah. He's amazing. You can just try to stump him. I challenge you to try to stump him because I don't think you can. He is.
I've got one. I'm going to keep it quiet though.
Oh, you're not going to tell me? Okay.
I'll tell you off the air.
Be that way. Okay.
Wayne, do you have any more questions from the gang?
I know Nick's kryptonite, and just a heads up, Jesse's going to Chicago.
No.
No, could that happen? No, that's just not going to happen. Cap Daniels is on. How you doing, Cap? Yvonne Edwards suggests Sigourney Weaver could be a good Seychelle.
Yeah,
Sigourney
a couple
is
of years ago
the baddest woman that ever lived.
I was going to say Alien Sigourney.
Alien.
Perfect Seychelle.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. Yeah, because then BJ could still be pretty big and tall, I think. Yeah.
And Nick Harvey asks, Christine, do you not share those images of your characters with your narrator?
No,
Pictures.
it never. No,
You don't
it
create.
didn't occur to me.
No, I did not need any visuals because
Well, visual
all
stimulation
right
doesn't really help so far as voice.
Yeah, I had
Not
an
very
author
much.
send me 30 pictures of different people and with names under all of them, and I looked at that and I went, "That's nice. What's in the text?"
What do they sound like?
You have to go by what's in the text. I mean, I'm delighted to hear that you can tell how someone would sound in your mind when you see that physical manifestation of your character. But really, and particularly with Seychelle and her characters, it was all right there. It was all right there. I didn't have to go. I didn't have to go anywhere to find them. They were right there. So, I mean, if you're the author, think about this. If you're thinking what formats you want your writing in, and down the road you want to, publish, or simultaneously publish your ebook or your, your hard copies with audio. That might influence how you write. It might, and not just the text where there's all kinds of, oh my gosh, can I just talk about onomatopoeia and, when you have like 16 words with P's in the beginning at the front. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna on my microphone 18 times. Oh my gosh. Things like that. I don't expect you to think about that when you're in the flow of writing, but if you're actually interested in doing an audiobook, I would suggest that you read your work aloud to yourself, or
Absolutely.
even record yourself. Just one chapter.
I now do a
Say
speech
that.
on my own novels. I have the Word do text to speech.
That's
yes, it's
interesting.
robotic, but I just sort of sit back and I catch all sorts of stuff that just don't jump out of the page.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan's signaling me that we are now at 1 hour. So
Okay.
we have reached the end of our show, our second show. I want to thank you, Christine, for being on with us, and Rosemary. It's been a great very enlightening and fun.
Yes, it has.
And
Oh, yes. It's so great.
Nick?
And it's so great to finally meet my author.
It is so great to meet the voice of Seychelle.
and it's been great to meet you both. Well, I've
Thanks
met
for having
Christine
us.
many times before. We're both NINC members, and we kind of
Yes.
hung out at the Tiki Bar last year.
Yes.
Aw, that's great. I hope I can do that sometime with any of you in the
Yes.
world.
I want to ride on your new boat, Wayne.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's a lot of fun.
I'll
So
bet.
anyway, that brings us to our conclusion. For everybody watching, thank you for tuning in. For everybody on Pirate Radio, thanks for the support, and we'll see you next month.